Hello folks, this is the facelifted version of the Toyota Yaris Cross. These start from 26.5 grand. The one I've got here today starts at about 32.5 grand, but it is super frugal. More on that in a sec. The Yaris Cross takes the compactness of a Yaris and basically jacks it up a bit. So you've got a higher driving position, better visibility on the road, and some people find it a bit easier to get in and out, particularly when they're advancing in years. This car's got a lot going for it, and also a couple of weak points. So I'm going to tell you all about all those in the course of this review. Now, if you go for Icon or Design trims, they come with a 116 horsepower, 1.5 litre engine. But if you go for Excel or GR Sport, as I've got here, you then get 130 brake horsepower. That's going to give you 0 to 62 times just over 10 seconds. But to be fair, it feels a little bit quicker than that, but we'll speak more about that in the test drive section of the review. You've also got exceptional frugality when it comes to your fuel consumption. This one has got a WLTP figure of 58.8, and in the real world, you can get 58.8. I've had this over 60 actually during the course of this week, and that's pretty impressive stuff. There are a few extras to be aware of. You may think those prices already look a little bit punchy. Your panoramic roof's £500 extra. The advanced safety pack is £1,000, but the standard safety equipment is really pretty generous. And if you want some side steps on it, you can get those for £469. But I think this one gives you everything you possibly need. As I said, the pricing feels a tad punchy against some of the competition, but the thing Toyota's got going for it is that amazing reliability reputation, and certainly some of their sort of service reputation as well is phenomenal. Best in class, or certainly in the top 3 names that regularly come up when we talk about reliability. So I referred to this car as a facelift, but it's more a midlife refresh, because in actual facelift terms, the changes are very, very minor. In fact, you might need the 2 cars side by side to even notice any of those changes. A lot of the things they've done are sort of behind the scenes, as it were. Actually, one that is quite upfront is you've now got new infotainment screens. We'll look at that in a second, but it's a huge improvement over the previous incarnation. Get a bit more standard safety tech than previously, and they've made a few changes to try and improve the refinement. You've also got Toyota Smart Connect now. So think of it more as a subtle tweak rather than a full midlife refresh. Boot space is very decent at just under 400 litres. We do have a bit of wackiness going on. Don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but there's a kind of split floor in the boot, which is interesting. You can also lower that floor, and of course the back seats go down with relative ease. And we've got a floppy parcel shelf, so if you do want to hide that away, that's quite an easy thing to do. You don't have this huge big lumbering thing that you've got to find a space for. And I think for the size of the car, the boot space is very, very generous. And whilst the boot space is not crammed with tech, you do have a little 12-volt socket and a light. So in the back here, leg room is not fantastic. I'm 5'9", and I wouldn't want that seat any further back, and that's my normal driving position. Obviously, if you had a 6-foot driver or a 6-foot passenger, they're going to be struggling a bit. Headroom's not too bad, you've got about that much, and you'd only really get 2 adults in the back here. The other weird thing is, there seems to be no connectivity for charging in here, which seems like a little bit of an oversight maybe. Generally, everything's a bit dark. The materials are nothing amazing feeling, but they'll probably age quite well. But it's not going to be a place for long journeys for 2 adults in the back here, that's for sure. Okay, so in the front cabin, there's quite a lot to like, and a couple of things that are kind of meh. The meh would be the materials and the overall design. Whilst this has got a bit of squashiness to it, and it does feel like a nice quality, it's all a bit dull. It's all a bit black, and it feels a little bit old-fashioned now. But there's something quite, I don't know, heartwarming about that. Toyota knows what they do well, and they kind of push into that, and they don't worry too much about some of the frivolous stuff. And there's something to admire about that, I think. We have got physical buttons and dials for the aircon. They work brilliantly well. You've even got a volume knob still, which you can just press to mute. Isn't that simple? Who'd have thought, hey? And if you go into the native infotainment system, I've got this new screen, which is nice and big and bold and bright. It's actually a really good user interface, in my personal opinion. They've certainly taken inspiration from some others in the market that have done it particularly well. And they've just come up with a system that's fairly intuitive, not complex in any way. And I think most people will be able to find their way around that without having to sit and watch tutorial videos to any great degree. There's also a decent driver information display that's quite customizable, so you can have different dials depending on your personal preference, or indeed you can have that so it's smart and it kind of changes with the drive modes. The drive modes you select down here with a drive mode button. That's not too arduous. There is an EV mode, just leave that alone, it's kind of meh. And you can turn off the traction control down here. And then we've got a couple of things for the parking brake, but of course that's automatic. As for the transmission, if you go onto the Toyota website, it just says automatic, but it appears to be an ECVT. So you do get a little bit of every now and again, but it then drops down. And you know what? That system works far better than an actual CVT gearbox does. You can get cars that have more dynamic driving experiences than this, but that's not particularly what this car is about, is it? Otherwise, we're fairly well spec'd in this. We've got heated seats, we've obviously got dual zone climate control, you've got the sat nav, you've got wireless Apple CarPlay, you've got wireless Android Auto, I believe, although I can't test that. And you've got really comfortable seats. They're really lovely, these. They're kind of a little bit sporty, so they wrap around slightly and they cling in all the right places. And you've got this either leather or leatherette material with some Alcantara, and they just feel and look great, actually. Also have to mention the steering wheel, which is wonderful. Got this perforated leather or leatherette around the sides, and then we've got proper buttons and a couple of flicky things on here. Again, it's all physical. We don't have any haptics or touch capacitive stuff. It just all works really well. We've even got an indicator stalk, Elon. Look at that. In terms of connectivity, you've got a 12-volt socket down here, a wireless charging pad, and 2 USB-Cs. A couple of cup holders and a little armrest, but no central storage bin. I think in terms of an all-round interior experience, it delivers in pretty much all the areas that you need, but it just doesn't provide a wow in any way. I think the one possible wow here is that screen, because it does look great. It's a massive upgrade from what came before, which looked like it was from a different era. But aside from that, I think it's very much function over form. And I think the thing we can say about this car is that this interior will still look pretty great, I imagine, in 5 years, possibly in 10 years. And a lot of this car's competitors won't be able to say the same thing. I promise you, this interior will age better than that in a Ford Puma, for example. I also have to mention that Toyota is still using the very worst reversing camera on the market. I think my 7-year-old son could draw a better picture with some crayons, and it's 2025. Maybe it's time for an upgrade. Okay, I'm going to start this test drive on this bumpy country track, because on these bigger wheels that you get in the GR Sport, you know, it is a little bit of a firm ride. It's certainly not by sports car standards, but it's slightly firmer than you would expect on a small, fairly well jacked up SUV like this one is. But don't let that put you off too much. I think test drive one, you may decide that a version of the car with smaller wheels would be preferable for you, but it is a little bit bangy and crashy on the very rough stuff. That was a particularly extreme example, however. In terms of the drivetrain itself, it's really pretty good. Despite the fact that the car doesn't have a crazy 0 to 62 time, the The hybrid system means that you still get away relatively quickly when you want to. And so that means if you just want to quickly nip out, as I did then, that's absolutely doable. And it means you don't get any of that dim-wittedness that you sometimes get with automatics at roundabouts and things, where you've almost come to a stop and then the space comes and off you go, and the car's kind of going, oh, shall I change gear? Shall we go now? Shall I engage? Or just have a little think about it. And sometimes that's a safety issue on really bad examples. Most modern cars are a bit better than that now, but we've all driven some horrible things in the past. This is not one of them. It's really nice and nippy and fairly immediate. You feel like everything's connected and you can make progress when you want. What's not so good is the refinement. Now, with this facelift, midlife refresh, tickle, whatever you want to call it, they have done a few things to try and improve that, and the road noise you get from passing cars is much improved. It wasn't the quietest car before, but we've still got quite a gruff engine sound that does get a bit agricultural, and we've also got a bit of tyre rumble. And although you do notice it around town, I think it's even more prevalent when you get out to motorway speed. So you can probably hear some of that low sort of grumble coming through. Now, I'm not doing anything to enhance or hide any background noise or anything like that. This is just the noise that my mic here is picking up in the car. So it's not devastatingly bad, but it's not as sedate as you would get in some of the car's rivals, in fairness. I've also left all the bings and bongs on in this video, so that's all the driver assistance features, safety features, all that kind of stuff. When they do kick in, I'm sure you've probably heard one or two already, it's just a gentle bong, bong. It's nothing offensive. Some of the cars that I've tested, it feel like you're getting clouted around the head with a blunt implement. This doesn't. It's there, you're alerted to something. If you creep over the speed limit, it will tell you about it. But it's not really, really annoying as it is in some cars. You can turn that off, although it's a wee bit of a faff. And of course, you'll have to do it every time you get in the car. The real standout feature of this car is its frugality. You've got a car that does perform quite well for the kind of car it is, but it will still return best part of 60 MPG in the real world. And that's without trying. That's with your aircon on. That's driving as you normally would. I'm not talking about hypermiling or anything. I could only imagine what you could get from one of these if you did hypermile. You'd probably get 80 out of it or something daft. But it's a car that you don't have to plug in, that you can get 60 MPG from. It's also a car that you can expect to be fairly reliable. We can only surmise based on evidence of previous Toyotas, but I'd imagine it's going to age very well. And it'd probably be a really good used buy if you don't want to run to the 20-odd thousand pounds for a new one. In terms of steering feel, it's really good. The steering wheel feels directly connected to those front wheels, and at all times you sort of know where the front wheels are facing. You don't have that vagueness that you get in a lot of cars. It's no race car by any means, but it is a car that you still feel engaged with. You feel like you're driving it, not that you're being driven by it, as you can in some modern cars. It's also fairly compliant in the bends. You don't get tons of body roll, despite the fact that the car does look fairly jacked up from the outside. Things like body roll are fairly well contained, and the overall weight of the steering is nice. It's got kind of a comforting level of weight to it. It doesn't feel really, really light, and I think that only helps with that overall steering feel. You do feel like it's a car that you're in control of. I also think the brakes are really well weighted. I go regularly from petrol cars to EVs, and the brake feel difference is massive usually, because the EV's doing a lot more of the braking for you, and sometimes the brakes can feel like a bit of an on-off switch, and then you can swap back into a petrol car or a hybrid car and it feels like you're standing through the floor to come to a stop. There's a bit of adjustment. That's not the case here. It feels like a really nice happy medium between the two. The brakes come in a really natural and progressive way, and you don't have that sort of binary feel that you get in some modern cars. I think Toyota knows the market for this car really, really well. They know it's people that are not going to be impressed by a load of frippery and just want a car that gets them from A to B. Whenever they attempt to go from A to B, you know, it's always going to start. It's always going to get you there. They're not going to spend half their life in the petrol station. And it's got all the features you want and need. Obviously, it's got modern sort of driver assistance things that not everyone wants. But if you want to get those Euro NCAP stars, by Jove, you need to have them. And yes, the car's got a premium price tag, and that's something you need to deal with really if you want one. But it's not because you're buying a flash car that's full of frippery and full of, you know, nice little design tweaks and a special bit of carbon fibre trim that's cost an extra 500 quid to make. It's got a premium price tag because it's a premium product that's going to last, it's going to age well, it's going to be really cheap to run, and it shouldn't break down on you. You won't get too many enthusiast drivers buying one of these, despite the fact that it does drive really well. But you will get lots of people that just want a really rock solid, reliable mode of transport to get them from A to B with sensible running costs. Despite that lack of refinement getting a little bit tiresome at times, I still have absolutely no hesitation in recommending one of these to anyone because it ticks pretty much every other box that you need it to tick. Simple as that, really. So the big pros for me for this car are the fuel economy. It's outrageous, it's brilliant. You don't need to try, and it will just sip at the petrol rather than gurgle it. And you still don't need to plug the car in. I think you can't look past that amazing reputation for reliability from Toyota. We have no idea how these cars will age, but if past experience is anything to go by, we can have a fairly safe bet that this will mature better than some of its rivals. The hybrid powertrain is good, although it could be more refined. It's smooth, it's fairly agile, it's nippy. Can I say nippy? So you're not left kind of loitering at roundabouts while the car decides if it's going to pull away or not. You've got an all-wheel drive option available. I mean, only in 2 of the trims, but that's rarefied air in a compact SUV. It really is very unusual. They've massively improved the infotainment technology. You've got more standard safety kit than you had before. And although they have improved that refinement, you know, it's still not where it needs to be. You don't get quite so much noise from traffic coming by as you used to, but there are still other rumblings, which I'm going into the cons now, and the refinement is one where I still feel the car's lacking. Get a lot of tyre noise, the engine can be quite gruff, but there's not so much noise from passing traffic as previously. Also, this one's on the bigger wheels, a little bit of a firm ride. I don't find it incredibly so. But you may want to go for a lower trim level with smaller wheels if you want something that's a bit more cosseting. Limited rear space, you know, there's not a massive amount of legroom and headroom, but look at the size of the car. And really, you're not going to be doing grand tours with the family with this. A couple of kids would be fine in the back, to be fair. But, you know, a couple of 6-footers are going to struggle in there. And I guess the biggest downside is the price. Do I think this is worth paying 10, 15, maybe 20% more than a Ford Puma if you're buying this car for the long term? Or even if you're buying one of these cars used? Yes, absolutely I do, because I think you'll save that not only in running costs, but I certainly think you'll save it in repair bills potentially, particularly when you have a look at the record of some of those EcoBoost engines. But there's a reason this car's more expensive. It's because they can get away with it, because they've built a reputation for making brilliant cars that last for years without too much drama. That's my thoughts on it anyway. Of course, don't let that price get in the way. Have a look at the latest leasing deals. There is a link in the video description that will take you to all the latest lease prices on a Toyota Yaris Cross. Please give the video a thumbs up. If you like this style of straightforward, no nonsense, slightly unprofessional car review, please let me know in the comments. See you on the next one.
Huge thanks to all my channel members for your continued support. I really do appreciate it.